We're the first panel. Please come and sit with us. We're the first panel, so we're setting the tone for the day. So there is a little bit of pressure on all of us to deliver a good session, particularly before the break. I have to say, I thought a little bit about saying something myself, and then I thought this time around, nobody wants to hear from me, but everybody wants to hear from the 4 founding members of the consortium of the Telecom Infrastructure Innovation Network. I'm only going to say a few things. Innovation is obviously key. Innovation is what has brought us here from 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G, and we're able to do all of the things what they're doing on wireless technology, but also on fixed, even if the focus here is a little bit more on wireless. And it has opened with 5G a lot more opportunity to deliver digital transformation in industry as well, to deliver increased productivity, efficiency, more sustainable type of solution. So clearly innovation has worked up until now, but I like what Nick said before in terms of a fragmented potential scenario out there of innovation coming from so many different places. So in a way, what UKTIN can do is bring all of this innovation together, foster it, and give it not only a UK stage, but also a global stage, which is in reality what we need if we want to develop a global ecosystem that works for the UK, but also globally. But that's it from me. I said I was going to be short. It's all about the founding member of the consortium. So we got here with us today representative, as you have seen from the agenda, who actually speak for themselves. Everybody knows you guys and your organization. We've got Joe Butler, the CTO of the Digital Catapult, previously of DCMS at the National Infrastructure Commission, and I should say also at Ofcom. We used to work together many, many years ago. We got Dimitra Simeonidou, is a professor of high-performance network at the University of Bristol, co-director of the Institute of Digital Future and the Smart Internet Lab, and has worked a lot as well with many startups throughout her career. We have got we've got Robert Franks, Managing Director of West Midland 5G, one of the first sort of local, regional 5G test beds and trials, where quite a lot of innovation, but also adoption has been pushed here in the UK. And then we got Paul Crane, the Chief Executive Officer of Cambridge Wireless, visiting professor at Surrey, and with a long experience as well in the sector at BT. So we can certainly say outstanding panel, great founding members for this UK Telecom Innovation Network, and a lot of experience in the telecom sector. So I have to say, it's almost now over to you guys. We've heard a little bit of a wider objective and introduction of a UKTIN from Nick. What I wanted to ask you all, and you might want to say a little bit more about yourself, etc., is, well, what is the role that your organization is going to play in bringing this consortium to life? Because you are coming from 4 different ways. How are you going to bring the consortium to life? I would say let's start from that end and come this way. So it's you, Joe.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, everybody. I'm Joe. As Cristina says, I'm the CTO at the Digital Catapult. Digital Catapult covers AI, telecoms and 5G. It covers virtual environments and future media. And we are the lead party of the consortium, responsible into DCIT for the delivery of UKTIN, and I chair the UKTIN project board. So that is just to disambiguate, that's the project board that delivers UKTIN, not the advisory board, which we'll hear from later, or the expert group. So we've appointed those advisory boards, which is great news. So my background, as Cristina says, is I've worked previously in the National Infrastructure Commission, where we wrote a report on 5G and digital, which ended up becoming recommendations into government and forming some of the policy. I then went briefly into government, into what was then called DCMS, and led what was then called the Telecoms team, not the digital infrastructure team, which Keith spoke about earlier in the opening remarks. And prior to that, I was in Ofcom, where I was a policy director and also led some of the engineering functions in the radio spectrum area, doing things like competition assessments in the mobile and telecoms industry, and also spectrum auctions, so the 4G auctions and 5G auctions. So I've seen the perspective from a number of different areas. I'm also a professor, an industrial professor at the University of Bristol. So that's my background, and I've got two reflections, I think, just on the kind of opening remarks by Keith and by Nick. 2 points to make. The first one is a really very fundamental point, I think, which is, I think it's fantastic to see the ongoing commitment and interest in this space and funding from government. I think that's a really fundamental, important thing. It's been going on for a number of years. Recognizing the telecom space is absolutely critical part of our everyday lives, critical part of national infrastructure, underpins so much. I think that's really important. It doesn't come without challenges, of course. Doing anything from inside government, creates challenges. So challenges are things like it's very hard to get coherence and clarity over exactly what to do. It's very difficult for government, for example, to deal in a deeply technological ecosystem. It's got its real challenges, and sometimes you need to focus on the micro, but actually really the big problems are macro problems. And then other challenges around long-term thinking. Real difficulty for governments around the world, but particularly in this country. And these things are long-term, and it's really important to maintain that long-term perspective. So I think that is a really critical, positive thing. And I think, the recognition that we need something like the UK Telecoms Innovation Network to foster those investments and the coherence across our ecosystem is really, really important. The second thing I would say, just as a sort of real upfront remark, is one thing I think that's really, really critical for UKTIN. I look at us in a way as the secretariat of UKTIN. We are the deliverers of UKTIN. We are here to help and facilitate. We are not the people that direct the opinions of what UKTIN should do. So in that, we don't have a horse in the race as partners. Neutrality of UKTIN is absolutely vital. So it's really important that we bring together, I think, discussions, debates, opinions. We want a plurality of opinions represented, which is the case in telecoms. We have many different opinions. And we can represent the distillation of those opinions across government, across industry, across the research landscape, etc. So I think I just want to make that point that I feel, as chair of the UKTIN board, that is a vital principle that we must reflect in everything we do.
Thanks very much, Joe. I really like the sort of secretariat. I put a /custodian almost. You are there to serve. Thanks a lot. Dimitra, what do you think?
I agree with you, Joe.
Here to serve.
Yes, here to serve. Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Dimitra. I work for the University of Bristol. I'm a professor of high-performance networks there. I also lead the communications and networks research at Bristol, which many of you know is large and absolutely world-leading. About 200 academics and researchers working on telecoms and related technologies, and we are working on technologies across the spectrum, from IoT, and this is not the Ofcom spectrum, it's from IoT to wireless to optical, software, hardware, cloud, and the applications associated with this. So I have been working for 30 years in telecoms myself, so all my life working in academia, in industry, spinning out startups out of the university, serving in different organizations, advisory or policy groups, and so on. So the day that I saw that actually in the science and technology framework, the telecoms names as one of the 5 key UK technologies, for the first time in my long career, I rejoiced. Probably one of the most joyous days of my life, or readings of my life, let me say. So So we are actually in a very good point in the UK in terms of making a change in our telecom ecosystem, in the industry, and being contributors, of course, of the global telecom industry. And UKTIN comes at this point, and actually, University of Bristol, my organization, is very, and myself, we are very actually grateful that we are able to support and contribute. University of Bristol is doing 4 things in this network. The one is that we are seeing ourselves as the conveners of the academic ecosystem. So if you see in the way that UKTIN actually has been formed, and the ecosystem that we actually like to address, UK academia is for the first time again central to our story, our ecosystem story, and our innovation story. So this is the one thing that we are doing, bringing actually our colleagues, academics. We have industrial, an academic leadership group or coordination group as part of our structure looking at long-term challenges. The second thing, we are leading the creation of what Nick mentioned as the Discovery Service. And I'm not going to go too long on that because there is another panel that we are going to describe services, but this is really creating the tools. And tools are databases and online tools, so actually capability can be discovered in the UK from different points of view and from different user journeys perspective. So that's the second one. Third, we are supporting the Digital Catapult and we are working with them on the capability coordination, so providing both technical secretariat and other support services to the expert working groups, helping to formulate opinions from the industry, opinions from the academia, and actually consolidate this community view to roadmaps, to white papers, and so on. And the fourth one, which I'm probably most excited about, University of Bristol and Bristol Innovation actually supports the innovation ecosystem discovery. So we are actually creating frameworks and knowledge what the innovation ecosystem, specifically SMEs and startups, look like in the UK. What do we need to serve them? And what kind of needs they have? And the second one, that part that is, we are looking at frameworks for translation of research. So how we can actually start translating early TRA research to commercial propositions. And these are my colleagues at Bristol Innovations that they're taking on this task and really try to see gaps in our innovation environment that probably prevent us to translate excellent research in our academic institutions, for instance, into strong commercial propositions in the global industry. And those, so my organization works across the network, but specifically looking at that R&D, early TRL side, and actually future capability, the longer term of capability creation for the UK.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Dimitra. I think you've also got a very, very exciting role in the context of translating all of these academic, well, bring it together first, and then translating it into something that matters for the industry. So excellent. Thank you very much. Robert.
Thanks, Cristina. Good morning, everyone. Robert Franks. I'm MD of West Midlands 5G. My organisation started life, as Cristina mentioned, as one of the 5G testbeds, so creating the UK's largest urban testbed, and we spent our first sort of 3 years of existence doing lots of exciting trials to accelerate the rollout of 5G and prove the value in key clusters locally and also nationally, collaborating with lots of players. Since we finished as a 5G testbed about a year ago, we've sort of been spun out as a self-sustainable commercial entity. We've got 3 key areas of focus which very much support my passion around UKTIN, which I'll talk about in a second. So firstly, we're working in partnership with many of you in the room around deployment. So how can we accelerate the rollout of 5G, public networks, neutral host networks, fibre networks, and other technologies as well, working closely with landlords and local authorities on the other side of the market as well. Secondly, and particular focus on UKTIN, innovation. So how can we create the conditions to accelerate R&D and innovation? We're participating with some of you in one of the Frank competitions, UKTIN I'll come back to. And then our third area of focus is adoption. So what really probably excites me the most is when you see the difference that the combination of world-class telecoms networks combined with other technology can make to people's lives and work, and how transformative that can be. I think that's what many of us all take great enjoyment of when it eventually comes around. And we're doing a lot of work at the moment on health tech and med tech, and also on some other verticals as well. So coming to the final piece, why UKTIN for us? So I think building on something Nick mentioned in his introduction, I passionately believe that to succeed further in the space of telecoms R&D and innovation, the UK needs to harness its collective strengths and capabilities. And I don't think those strengths and capabilities exist in one location. I think they're dotted all over the UK in different clusters. Some of them are based around universities or catapults, or other organisations. Some of them are based around really pioneering work on the demand side, for example, areas where they're doing work around smart cities, smart rural deployments and other types of things. And it's the collective strengths of those clusters that I think give us the raw ingredients to hopefully define the next 10 to 20 years of success in this space. I should also say I'm really excited about the next 10 or 20 years, because I think whatever we may think as telecoms, about telecoms, the fact of the matter is that digital technologies collectively, and I've been fascinated about all the recent press around things like ChatGPT and stuff like that, but all of those technologies collectively are transforming and will continue to transform all of the sectors that we're competing in the UK and globally. And all of those sectors require network innovation in some shape or form over the next 10 to 20 years. So I think seen in that bigger tech context, I think it's hard to dispute the need for innovation R&D. The other piece then finally I should touch on is skills. So skills are obviously the raw ingredient for all of our organisations. We're aware there's a skills gap today around tech as a whole, and certainly around parts of telecoms. Just as a very quick aside, I think I've shared with some of you, I was keen to get more insight around where the skills gap is today. So one of the things I did a few months ago was I went on to one of the big jobs search sites, and I did a bit of a search on RF, radio frequency engineering roles. And one of the interesting things that came up is it showed lots of job vacancies, admittedly down the deployment end. But what was really interesting was many of the organisations recruiting those roles weren't telecoms companies. You had McLaren looking for RF engineers to put sensors into their cars. You had British Aerospace looking at defence applications. So everybody wants the skill sets we've got in the telecoms industry for their own businesses, because IoT, the Internet of Things, is transforming every industry. And so I think there's some really important opportunities and challenges that we also need to address in how we develop our talent, both to address those short-term skills gaps, but also to build some of the specialist skills we need in the R&D space and some of the emerging innovation space. So that's why I'm passionate about UKTIN.
Yes. Thanks very much, Robert. And I think we've heard more and more the sort of term collaboration and collective. So this is really the role of UKTIN, and I totally agree on skills. I was sitting on a panel at the 6G symposium with someone from the Next Generation Alliance in the US, and this woman said, well, when in the US you realize that you got 10 experts on this, it's becoming a bit of a problem, yes. So I think skills is something important, and coming from a woman in engineering who is also trying to fight the gender disbalance, definitely something we need to do something about. Yes, I'm sure you've seen a lot of this. Paul, over to you.
Paul Crane, so I'm CEO of Cambridge Wireless. Long-term career in the telecoms industry in research and development. I'm a telecoms engineer, so please pass the job opportunity. Effectively working in the forefront and pushing innovation in telecoms infrastructure for a number of years now. And it's one of the really interesting things working in the UK, this is actually seeing the strengths that there are in the UK, both in the operators, but also in the vendor community, for innovation and forward-looking work. From research in universities, through to spin-outs from universities and work in the SME sector. And one of the passions of mine is actually that translation, as Dimitra was saying, that translation between academic research, which was massive investment, massive skills, into creating value in the industry. And I think UKTIN, is in a really good position to be able to help with that. Okay. So Cambridge Wireless. Cambridge Wireless is a really vibrant membership organisation. I know many of you here are actually members. Our focus is really, it's a membership organisation for the tech industry. Our heritage is wireless, but as the industry has expanded, then that's basically digitally connected technologies, so it doesn't leave out much these days. Cambridge, although is where we're located, although we operate Cambridge and also nationally and also internationally as well. The core of the activities that we do are based around our membership, and the fundamental part is what we call our special interest groups, and those are peer forums which work together to network, connect with each other, to learn, and to help grow their companies or grow themselves as individuals. Just to give you a couple of examples of the stuff that we do. In 2 weeks' time, starting the 8th of May, is Cambridge Tech Week, and Cambridge Wireless is the power behind that. I hope you're all registered to go. If you're not, I think there are still some tickets available. One of the other things I'd like to highlight as well is actually related to what Rob was saying. So Cambridge Wireless has its own private 5G network testbed. And we use that to run what we call accelerators, but basically innovation programs for larger companies. And we are running an innovation program on that testbed now, which is starting, and we're recruiting for people who've got applications in the manufacturing or factory space to run on that. So that's an example of the sort of stuff we do. And we're recruiting there now. So if any of you have got those sorts of applications, then please shout to one of the Cambridge Wireless team in the audience here. So UKTIN, I mean, it's actually, for me, it's actually brought together, two real passions. One, that translational research, but secondly, the core of what Cambridge Wireless does, which is that networking and almost serendipitous stuff that comes out from that getting together, and bringing those two things together. You see, there's a real opportunity to actually start, as Nick was saying, to start actually aligning some of the disparate stuff that we're actually seeing happening around in the UK, and pushing in a single direction. So I think, for me, UKTIN is that catalyst, to help that happen. But that catalyst is going to really require that larger community of working together. So we're responsible for the marketing, the comms, and the ecosystem within UKTIN, and it's drawing on that core strength from our Cambridge Wireless experience. So hopefully we can do that, but I think there's a real opportunity to push technology and innovation in the UK, leverage the great skills and capabilities that we have, and drive towards becoming, I think, a real leader in the next few years.
Thanks very much, Paul. Again, you've touched on collaboration, connecting things, but I also find interesting the sort of almost coming at the end, as if we had sort of planned this way. We didn't. This sort of platform for all of the other areas, these networking capabilities that actually Cambridge Wireless offers. So I don't know about you, but it really makes sense to me why you are the 4 founding members, and how all of the sort of different contribution are there to be the custodian, the secretariat, etc., but also to support industry and academia to actually deliver. Now, we've got a little bit of a challenge in terms of time, because we only have 15 minutes for questions. So whilst I had a long list of questions, I want to first give an opportunity to the audience to see if there are immediate questions. If not, obviously, I've got my bank of questions to ask. So if anyone has an immediate need to ask a question, of course, here we go. Please, over to you.
Yeah, my name is Ray Lemaitre. I'm from Telecom TV. Are there any parts of the telecom industry that the UK can be a leader in? I mean, if you look at Israel, you could say that Israel is a leader in cybersecurity, for example. Are there any particular parts of the industry where the UK could truly be a world leader?
Joe, please.
So when I was at this place called the National Infrastructure Commission, which I mentioned, and at the time I joined, there was a commission from the then Chancellor, George Osborne, to the National Infrastructure Commission, and it said, how can we be world leaders in 5G? You know, there's always a lot of political froth and ambition and desire to be, you know, the world leader in X. And the answer we ended up coming back with was one that I, you know, slightly stuck in the throat, to be honest, but is a reflection, I think, of something in the general terms, which is we're not world leaders in the production of the hardware and some of the technology that underpins 5G. We can be world leaders, actually, in being at the very front of the queue, exploiting 5G and the value that it brings to the economy. Now, that felt, and there's lots of logic and lots of recommendations that came from that, but it reflected the fact that there's been huge investment in other areas globally, in some of these areas, which are very, very long term. Now, I think what's really interesting at this moment, actually, is there are things that are changing. So the landscape of the way the supply chain works in telecoms is diversifying and fragmenting. And there are much smaller areas where you can make investments and really play well in that ecosystem. So there's a real kind of contextual market change going on. And then we have areas where we are very strong in the UK. You know, we're strong in a number of the underpinning research areas, underpinning telecommunications capability. We're super strong historically in software, in AI, in applying those techniques. I think actually telecoms is one of those areas that is ripe for AI to sweep through and transform in quite a fundamental way. There's often very cliched conversations about AI. You know, of the moment, everyone's talking about ChatGPT or stability AI or stable diffusion. It is massive, the change that is coming. And actually, this ecosystem has become much more open to it through a number of kind of open networking initiatives, and that door is opening for third parties to be able to come in and play. So I don't think that kind of answers your question, particularly in very niche areas, but I think it gives a bit of context to it.
Yes. Dimitra wants to add something, please.
Hi, Ray. One of the reasons, this is a key question that you are asking naturally, and one of the reasons that we are doing that capability discovery work within UKTIN is exactly to answer this question. It is quite clear we are not having a big vendor here, and but the thing is that are there technologies that we are leading? Are there opportunities where we can produce new technologies or solutions to play in the global market as a supplier of the solution in collaboration with big industry, or you're now catalyzing a part of the telecom ecosystem that actually the UK needs to lead and catalyze. Now, this is the UKTIN, if you like, what we would like to do. I have personal opinions myself, so if I may, I would like to go into this. When actually an industry is diversified, there is more opportunity for new entries and new technologies. And I'll give you the great example about photonics in the UK. And I don't know how many of you know, we lead in photonics in the UK. We are industry leaders. Why? Because the industry is very diversified for quite some time. We are working on open networking concepts in optical comms for long time now. And the UK has a very large number of these small, excellent companies. Not the big ones, not the giants, but small, excellent, that they actually supply the industry either on their own or as part of big vendor propositions. So we have examples like this, where actually we diversify and then we create that leading opportunity for commercial propositions from the UK. But we are in discovery journey here, and these are the answers exactly that we're seeking to get.
Thank you, Dimitra. Oh, Paul, you want to?
Yeah.
Definitely a very topical question, to be honest.
Very
Yes.
topical question. I think one of the things we need to is what time frame we aim the target at. Now, there's we know there's massive disruption going on in the way that telecoms equipment's built at the moment. From buying appliance from a large organisation through to network functions virtualization, cloud-based infrastructure, disaggregation, and open architectures. Now, that sort of disruption, I think, always presents an opportunity. There's a general view that the UK is great at running software. And the real innovation that we can partake in is now that software layer that fits onto the hardware, which is potentially built elsewhere and supported elsewhere. In my previous job, I was running a research program, networks research, and when I started, it was kind of, if you like, 90% the traditional physics-based research, 10% a bit of software. When I finished April last year, it was kind of 50% physics-based research, 50% AI, data science. So there's a massive shift in that whole translational research into industry. Dimitra mentioned photonics. The photonics industry in the UK is really impressive. I was reading reports saying it's actually worth more than the pharmaceutical industry. But the reason we don't hear about it is because it's primarily SMEs that are executing that space. A related example to that, there was a spin out from Southampton University, Luminicity, who produced quite frankly, world-beating new type of fiber, a hollow core fiber. And last year, they were bought up by Microsoft. So it's kind of, that highlights that there are two sides to your story. One, there is great innovation, but how do we exploit it for the UK? And finally, I was at actually the 6G conference down in Surrey yesterday. Some really fantastic radio research going on, world-leading radio research in high-frequency bands, and real opportunity to start to look at how we exploit that and translate that into real value. And of course, at Surrey, satellite. If I was sat here a few years ago, I would have said, talked about satellite as part of comms, I would have been completely dismissive, okay? But there's been such innovation in there, and a lot of it driven from the UK, okay, that there is real opportunity, I think, there too.
Thank you. Thanks very much, and thanks for the question. I'm going to throw one in, kind of related, which is I really like, Dimitra, your point of this sort of exploratory journey to say, okay, what are the golden eggs in this basket, almost? And the discussion that we've had were all around technical innovation, what technology can do for you, because clearly so the question was around that. Innovation can be innovation under very many different sort of facets or many different shades of grey. So how much is UKTIN going to focus not only on the technology innovation aspect, but also on potentially supporting, and we're going into almost the next panel, sorry Ross, into how can then you help industry understand, well, is there something more than just getting the new software upgrade, deploying a very, very high frequency spectrum that is around the business models, that is around cultural changes, transformation? Who wants to take that one? Yes, please, Robert.
Yeah, so I think UKTIN has to be a broad church in terms of innovation. So I think, to your point, it is about how we can collaborate with the ecosystem to advance technology innovation. But in order to do that, if you think about the innovation funnel, it's not just the adoption at the end where you have the demand side involved, and the non-technical aspects aren't purely leading up to that point. So I was talking, for example, briefly to Dimitra this morning about some of her colleagues about, some of the work that's going to be led sort of on how we support startups, for example, to spin out of universities. A lot of that's non-technical. It's about how to get access to investment. It's about understanding the product development cycle in telecoms companies. It's about working in partnership with organizations, protecting IP. So I think there's all of that sort of early stage development, R&D spin out. There's then, I think, a middle part to it. So one of the sort of challenges, stroke opportunities that I think exists across the UK in tech as a whole, but also in telecoms, is how do we create more scale-up businesses? These small startups that go on to, I think the threshold for scale-up is often defined as £50 million revenue, 100 people employed or more. And those businesses go on to have a disproportionate impact. So how can we support those later stages of investment? And then I do think there is a role, to your question as well, for the customer. I mean, the customer in many of these instances may be a mobile operator, maybe an equipment vendor, maybe a tower co, maybe a whole host of other demand-side organizations, but how we help those organizations, as well as their own innovation and R&D programs, to get more visibility of what's happening, how it's evolving, I think is important. And I do think, finally, the business model does come into some of that as well. So I think there's a whole sort of slew of what I would call business as usual benefits from innovation, reducing energy consumption, improving coverage, resiliency, security, all of those critical things, particularly on public networks as well as private. But I do think there's a really exciting space around new business models that again, we need to collaborate across the ecosystem to support.
Excellent. Thanks very much. And you've actually answered some of my questions with regards to is this public or private in the reality in terms of networks. You will be focusing on both. I think, Joe, and then Dimitra, you wanted to say something.
Okay. All right. I'll be quick.
Yeah.
So I'm boringly just going to agree and build a little bit on that point, I think. So there's clearly a need for us in TIN to really focus on a lot of the capability areas which will be technically or specialist in nature, clearly. I think there's a huge need for us to focus on the wider areas and the wider things that your question really comes to: what holds back translational research, product development? What holds back companies in the UK from getting products into the market and matured? And it's a whole range of things. And so I think we clearly need to recognize that. And we've got, I think, a power of sort of taking a vertical sector like this and actually focusing on some of those issues. One of the reasons I was really pleased that we were able to appoint Nick as the lead for UKTIN is that he comes from a company of, where that journey has been through to a degree, founding a company, taking it through that journey of being challenged by investment, by a myriad of things that happen in the UK to get an SME to a situation where it starts to have increasing scale, and through to exit. So I think that kind of perspective in those of us here who are trying to help UKTIN as the secretariat, as I think of it, is really important. And so I think we've got to focus on all of those areas. If you take something like Open RAN, so I don't see UKTIN as backing one technology or another. That would be a disaster. We mustn't do that, going back to my neutrality point. However, we are here to foster and facilitate a thriving, diversified ecosystem. And if you take something like Open RAN is very, very much about disruption and changing the dynamics of a market environment. And that brings innovation, that brings potential. And we'll have a heterogeneous market going forwards, and we should have no particular view on that within UKTIN. But I think it's really important to make sure that we recognise those opportunities that arise, and we are clear about those, so others who are making things like investment decisions can do those with information, with evidence, and with some sense of the nature of the debate, particularly in the UK, I think.
Thanks, Joe. Dimitra, you wanted to add
Yeah,
something?
I mean, I absolutely agree, of course. But going back to your question, what drives innovation beyond technology?
Yeah.
And this is an important question. And I think all of us, we have noticed the change of the conversation in our industry. And we start talking more about values rather than performance. Mm-hmm. So key value indicators. Why this is important? This is important because it takes away the conversation from performance, which is who is doing the best technology, to values, which is who makes the best impact. And the impact is wider. Impact is, of course, commercialization, is opportunity, but also impact is on environmental footprint. And so how we can make our own technologies and solutions more energy efficient, but at the same time, how we can contribute to net zero targets for the digitalization, thinking about digitalization, digital transformation wider. Of course, we have to start thinking about trust and privacy. That's what people are caring about inclusion and equity in the way that we are providing services. So all those are becoming very important. Yeah. And I think that once we start bringing these questions into our innovation thinking, we are going to drive better technologies. So that's very short from me, but I think that we are going to be in these conversations more and more in the future.
Thank you very much. I really like the concept of key value indicator. The KVI is the new thing we need to think about. I hope that maybe we may squeeze in an extra question. I mean, we're running out of time, but if there is an extra question from the public, I would be keen to hear it. Yes, please. Thank you very much.
Hello, friends. First of all, greetings from Latvia. Maybe I'm not only one who is not from Britain, but still, we are with Miglet together here, sending greetings from Baltic states. So I would like to ask, what's your ambition in terms of value through international collaboration, and can you describe it?
It's a good question. It's a really important aspect. We all know that telecoms is an entirely international, global affair, if I put it that way, and that's how progress is made. And so it's only on the international stage, really, by things gaining traction, that we, will see, I think, substantial impact. So how does UKTIN do that? I think that's a really interesting question. I think it's a challenging question. So we've got limited scope, is the first thing to say. So I think there is a domestic perspective to what we're doing, for sure. And then there are questions, for example, around standardization, questions around international cooperation, how do we foster those things? And I think those are all live questions, and we do have an ambition to take that forwards within UKTIN. I think the scale of that and how it interoperates with other communities that there are in the UK who are also playing on that journey, whether it's government in terms of trade and industry, whether it's regulators in terms of harmonized standards and positions, that the UK adopts. All of those we've got quite a complex ecosystem when we start talking internationally. It's crucial, I think, that the UKTIN plays its role as the front door in those in those conversations. So we should be acting to act as and bring some coherence to those and represent, I think, within the ecosystem, those whose voice is often not as heard as it can be. But there may be others who can sort of talk more about the how.
Yes, Robert, please.
Yeah, so just a couple of points to add to what Joe was saying. So I think for me, one very clear ambition is to significantly raise awareness of some of the UK's strengths and capabilities. So I think part of that comes back to the previous question around what do we want to be famous for. But I think getting clarity on that and then making sure that runs like a sort of stick of rock, if I can use a sweetie analogy, through everything we're talking about, how we're engaging. I think we need to recognise that other parts of the international community are on a similar journey, as you will have seen. I don't know, not familiar myself with Latvia, but certainly US. Other parts of Europe seem to be engaging. So I think greater awareness. I think inward investment is another key outcome that we're not going to drive. It's through yourselves, but it is a measure of success. So if people are aware of it, if they're engaged with the proposition of what the UK has to offer, then I'd like to be, proving that we've got more opportunities like the spin out that Paul was talking about, where people are coming, investing to in the UK in areas that we want to be famous for. Be great to see more partnerships internationally. So I know the UK government's already partnered with a number of other countries. I think there was a South Korea one about around 5G as an example of that. So I think finding those areas of mutual interest and collaboration across the value chain, as Joe was talking about, is probably a third one. So those are three I'd also add, if I may.
Yes. Dimitra,
Just
yes.
very quickly, UKTIN is about R&D.
Yeah.
And
R&D is
the last few years, unfortunately, we were left a little bit outside what's happening R&D internationally. Yeah. So for me, I think that one of the key focuses, and I'm talking in terms from academic and R&D perspective, is really our academic community. It would need a lot of support in telecoms when hopefully we get to participate in Horizon Europe. And I'm absolutely certain that this is going to happen because I'm going to be very sad if this is not going to happen. But also there are going to be actually, we have to look what is happening, collaborate on early R&D, what's happening elsewhere. US is a good example. Japan is a good example. What's happening in South Korea is a good example. So as part of our signposting would be also to look at the early R&D and what and how, UK academia, industrial R&D functions, they could collaborate internationally. If we don't do it, we are going to internalize hopefully a lot, and it's not good for the industry and our community.
Yes, I totally agree, and I think it's actually a very good way to finish this initial panel with a question on the international reach, because everything spans across internationally. You cannot really create this set of boundaries, even only thinking about some of the public networks here in the UK. There are international companies that have got presence elsewhere. This is a global ecosystem, so how can we leverage the knowledge, the internal collaboration that UKTIN will bring together to actually give it, as I'm finishing where I started, to give it a global stage. So thank you very, very much to all our panelists, Joe, Dimitra, Robert, and Paul, for giving us a much better understanding, or at least I certainly benefited for this, of how they will all come together and how UKTIN can actually make a difference. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.